Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? It's me, Mr. 4K Upscaler. I got some new settings for PlayStation 4 Pro game HDR mode for OLED. All of the 8 series OLED, you can use these settings. As a matter of fact, I would even use these settings with a 7 series, but it's mainly intended for 8 series. So if you have 8 series, E8, C8, B8, doesn't matter, these settings will work. Currently, I'm using believe it or not, this is a PlayStation 4 Pro version of Division 2. And you're going to say, wow, but it looks so sharp, looks so good. What's the trick, Potter? Well, the trick, Potter, is next. I'm going to show you. Alright, so the first trick is make sure that your sharpness is at 4. That's the first recommendation that I would tell you to do. Leave the sharpness at 4. The next step is the color at 53. Remember, guys, I'm not a professional calibrator, but what I do is I do a bunch of different experiments and tests. And what I do try to do is for every and each panel, I try to do my custom picture settings in accordance to calibrating rules. So I try to avoid oversaturation. I try to avoid crushing my black digital levels, and I try to avoid overblowing my white bright digital levels. So color at 53. Now color temperature, it's something I've been looking into this for video games, and for PlayStation 4 Pro I have noticed, not just for PlayStation 4 Pro, for all of the video games, Xbox One X, PlayStation 4 Pro, it's best to leave the color temperature on a balanced level. Meaning you don't want to go too warm, nor do you want to go too cold. I try to keep it in a balanced level. Warm, it's good for movies. Cold, I guess it's good for sports. But for the video games, it's best to leave it in the middle. Now, brightness, it's something you should always keep at 50. When it comes to OLED, honestly, guys, you have the best possible black digital levels. All right. So anybody who knows anything about the organic light emitting diode, you know that you have the best possible black digital levels. Therefore, no reason for you to mess around with the brightness. Leave it at 50. So that's what I recommend. Leave it at 50. Moving on. Now, very important, when it comes to the HDR, guys, there is no way around it. When you're watching an HDR content, gotta have that OLED light to 100. But remember, you're not gonna be watching OLED with HDR nonstop, okay? But you gotta have that OLED at 100. If you truly want to appreciate what HDR can do, you have to turn that OLED light to the 100. Same thing goes with the contrast. The contrast has to be set to maximum. Same thing with the contrast. You want the contrast to be at 100. This is for the HDR. If you're not watching an HDR content, you can turn it off. But majority of these games support HDR, so you want to have that contrast and OLED at 100. Meaning contrast and OLED light and 100. Right there. All right, so let's move on to advanced controls, dynamic contrast. I have found out that dynamic contrast really helps with the HDR, especially when it comes to the OLED. This is only going to enhance much brighter picture and give you a much better, brighter image that HDR so desperately needs. And on the OLED, on this new 8 series, it's going to look magnificent. Now, let's step back. I said magnificent for the OLED, but it's not going to be as bright as QLED. That should be clear. But I still prefer this kind of a picture quality than what I'm getting on the QLED. That's just my preference. So I like to keep dynamic contrast at high. Moving on. In my honest opinion, dynamic tone mapping is the one caveat that you get for the HDR on the OLED. And anyone whom I spoke to who had C7, B6, C6 will tell you that this dynamic tone mapping definitely helps with a much brighter HDR. When you combine dynamic tone mapping with a dynamic contrast set to high, and you cranked up that OLED light with a contrast level to maximum, you will definitely have a much better HDR picture quality on this game. And the reason I'm using Division 2 as that one example, because to me, Division 2 and Ubisoft really deliver on HDR tone mapping in the best possible way. Now this one here, dynamic color, it's my own personal preference. I like dynamic color to be set to high. What does dynamic color does? Dynamic color, it enhances a brighter color, and that's what you want. You want a much brighter color, especially for the HDR, for a color gamut. I mean, you already got a good color gamut here, but what this basically does, it brightens up that color. In basic terms, it brightens up that color, so the HDR will look even more better. So remember, you want to take a full advantage of HDR, so this setting, it's game HDR setting. My own custom game HDR settings that I'm trying to give to you guys for those of you who have OLED. And this applies for all of the HDR PlayStation 4 Pro games. This settings you can also use. Probably I'm going to use the same setting and test it with a Days Gone when it comes out this Friday. And of course, you want the color gamut to be set to wide. This is a no-brainer. This is where you want your color gamut to be set at wide. Now, black levels, you can keep them at low. Keeping them at high, it's not going to really achieve anything except it brighten up your black digital levels to be more grayish instead of black. And the idea of the black digital levels is to be the best possible black digital levels. And anyone who knows anything about the OLED knows that the OLED has the best pure possible black digital levels. So keep it at low right here. Keep it at low. Now, True Motion, it's something that you guys can determine on your own. This is a special interest. This is a personal preference. Meaning that motion flow, it's good on this OLED. The Alpha 9 processing chip does a great job with the motion flow. But the motion flow, it's something that you will have to determine on your own, whether you want it or you don't want it. It's a personal preference. Remember, the motion flow, it's a personal preference. Some people will like it, some they won't. So I'll leave the motion flow something that you guys can determine whether you want to use it or don't want to use it. It's up to you. So it's a personal preference. So this one doesn't really matter either or. However you, whatever floats your boat. If you don't want it, don't use it. If you like it, use it. It's a personal preference. So that's it, guys. That's pretty much what I have for you on this HDR game mode. I hope you will utilize these settings. Remember, This is just my recipe. If you guys don't like it, don't use it. But it doesn't cost you anything to at least try it once. I'm gonna try these settings with Days Gone to see how these settings work with Days Gone. But I think these settings that I implemented here are gonna look good on Days Gone as well. And if you look at my settings and you compare them to a professional calibrator, you will see just how close I am to a professional calibration. Because what I try to do, I try to stay within the rules of professional calibrations. I'm not oversaturating colors. I'm not crushing my black digital levels. I'm not overblowing my white digital levels, and I'm not cranking up that sharpness to the oblivion. So I try to stay within a rules of professional calibration, you know, standards. So there you have it. Let me know what you think. Like I said, if you don't like it, you don't have to use it, but this will only work for the OLED. If you don't have OLED, obviously you shouldn't bother with this video. Give it a try. You know, if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you remember, you don't have to use it. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no refund policy here. You're not paying for it. It's free. Use it. Don't like it, don't use it. Simple as that. Alright guys, well thank you for watching. So like I said, if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, don't use it. But I'm sharing it with you. Let me know what you think. Alright guys, have a good one, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.